The North Country has some of the darkest skies in the East. The Adirondack Sky Observatory in Tupper Lake is nationally known for minimal light pollution. This is important not just to see stars. Migrating birds get disoriented by lights at night. The movement to protect birds by turning out the lights. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Clarkson University, offering over 95 programs of study with campuses in the Hudson Valley, Central and Northern New York. More at clarkson.edu. And AmeriQ Credit Union, providing money market accounts, a savings option suitable for short-term goals or everyday access to funds. Details at ameriq.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Friday, May 1st, May Day, International Workers' Day. We salute you. First up, the most tangible impact of the Iran war in the North Country is the price of gas. It's pushing $5 a gallon for regular fuel at some stations. The war and the resulting restrictions on ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz have also driven up the price of fertilizer. As Kara Chapman reports, North Country farmers are feeling the effects.
Almost 70% of farmers in the Northeast can't afford to buy all the fertilizer they need. That's according to a survey conducted by the American Farm Bureau Federation in early April.
It's not a rosy outlook for anybody, really.
David Fisher with the New York Farm Bureau says farmers were already dealing with multiple challenges this year. Lower milk prices, high labor costs, burdensome regulations, tariffs. Then at the end of February, the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. That led to the restriction of movement through the Strait of Hormuz, a major artery for global trade. And that's driven up combined fuel and fertilizer costs by 20 to 40%. Fisher and his family own a large dairy farm in the St. Lawrence County town of Madrid. He says farmers in the midst of spring planting have to weigh the risk for yield loss depending on how much they do or don't decide to fertilize. And he says dealers don't know if they'll be able to get all the fertilizer farmers will need, which could be a problem in the Northeast.
From a nitrogen standpoint, we are probably one of the later growing seasons. So if it runs short towards the end of the season, we could be more in jeopardy than other places across the country or in the world.
Fisher says another big concern is the multiplier effect of increased prices.
Delivery charges, whether it be from the Port of Montreal or the Port of Albany on any feed, fertilizer, and ingredients, there's going to be surcharges. So it's not just the increased cost of that product, it's the increased cost along with freight and other things that impact all the things along the way.
On whether he's heard from any farmers who voted for President Donald Trump and are now frustrated with the challenges facing their farms, Fisher says he tries to stay out of political discussions. Still, he says unpredictable events over the last several years, like the COVID pandemic and now the conflict in the Middle East, are stressful for everyone. And he says since the United States is a net importer of food, Americans need to be aware of the impacts of these events on the food system.
Food security is national security. And, as we saw during COVID, if the boat doesn't show up, you don't get it. And if it's food that you depend on, that's a concern. And as more farms go out of business and things change, it's very concerning from a national security standpoint.
Fisher says he doesn't know how long it would take for fuel and fertilizer costs to return to an affordable level once traffic through the strait goes back to normal. He says typically prices go up more quickly than they come down. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio.
A North Country state lawmaker says after months of financial uncertainty, the North Star Health Alliance, which operates the hospitals in Ogdensburg and Carthage, may have some hope for its future. Our news intern Richard Haller reports.
The North Star Health Alliance got some relief last month after the New York State Department of Health approved a financing plan to provide the fragile healthcare organization up to $15 million over the next 2 months. The hospitals operated by North Star in Ogdensburg and Carthage were on a financial cliff. North Star filed for bankruptcy, its CEO quit, and 120 employees were laid off. 70 more left in February. Assemblyman Scott Gray says financial projections are still grim, but he's more optimistic now than before.
There is more clarity about what's happening at North Star because of the management change and, the change with the financial, staff there. I think there's more focus on what needs to be fixed.
Gray says the fixes are short-term and that the hospitals are still in need of state funding to stay open. Right now, he says that North Star is looking for an operational partner.
And really expressing to the partners that We're just not here for you to swallow up the services and take them someplace else. We have a real need for some of these services in these communities.
Gray says he's cautiously optimistic about the Health Alliance's future. He says that's partly because he thinks the new CEO, Andrew Manzer, a 30-year-old healthcare veteran, understands what the problems are and is providing clarity for the Department of Health. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Richard Haller.
So as we all know, this is a time of year that birds migrate, moving from their warmer winter homes back north. And to aid their journey and to cut down on bird deaths, New York has ordered all state buildings and offices to dim or turn off non-essential lights at night. The program is called Lights Out, and you can get involved too. Amy Feiereisel reports.
Starting in 2022, New York has required state buildings and offices to dim or turn off non-essential lights at night from April 15th through the end of June. That's when many birds migrate, and they mostly do so at night.
Thousands of birds every evening moving through the sky.
That's Dan Rosenblatt, a wildlife biologist with the Department of Environmental Conservation.
A whole suite of the species actually use stars to help navigate across the night sky, but particularly when there's cloud cover and they can't see the sky, when the sky is not clear, human-generated light on the ground seems to distract them and essentially send them off course.
There's a couple ways that artificial lights mess with migrating birds. Human-created light can mimic the night sky and confuse birds that navigate via the stars. Lights can also attract birds. Rosenblatt's seen that firsthand when he worked on Long Island at a well-known lighthouse.
On particularly cloudy evenings during the spring migratory period, you might get 80 to 100 dead birds at the base of the lighthouse. They're traveling at 30 or 40 miles an hour as they're heading towards it. They don't see the structure underneath the light, and they actually just collide directly with the structure.
The official state effort to reduce lights is part of a much larger movement, says Rosenblatt, which the National Audubon and research groups like the Cornell Lab of Ornithology are involved in too.
They all basically look for volunteers wherever they can. So whether it's independent businesses, whether it's folks that own a lot of real estate, or individual landowners.
Really, everybody can participate, said Rosenblatt.
And that's both, lights inside a house, external lights, floodlights, that sort of thing.
Northern New York might seem like small potatoes when compared to big metropolises like New York City or Buffalo. But in a sea of dark, light can be even more disorienting, said Rosenblatt. He said a city like Plattsburgh, without much light pollution around it, can be dangerous on a cloudy night.
If the birds are heading, in the vicinity of the Plattsburgh area, and you wind up getting one of these fronts moving through that has really low cloud cover, the birds will kind of move below the clouds. And that's a scenario where having that sort of singular city might actually be sort of like a stronger attraction for them. But the flip side of that is if a city like Plattsburgh participated in this program, theoretically, that would clear the area for a much larger area for the birds to be able to move through.
Rosenblatt also wanted to point out that the vast majority of bird collisions with buildings happen within 30 feet of the ground, many of them with large picture windows that are perceived by birds as open spaces. So every house or building in rural areas has a role to play in keeping birds safe. Rosenblatt said you can visually break up windows and make bird collisions less likely to happen. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio.
The story originally aired in 2024. We have more news all the time and through the weekend on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Evan Veenstra of Gananoque, Ontario, and Pencil Dive of Saratoga Springs. Have a super weekend. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.